Hello and welcome. As a congenital heart surgeon from Munich, it's my pleasure halfway through the EACTS meeting to introduce the chair of congenital domain. It's Mr. Braun from Birmingham, outstanding surgeon, then a very famous surgeon from Germany. It's Dr. Raschka from St. Augustin, and a surgeon in training, Peter von der Vostijne, I think I pronounced that rightly, from Rotterdam. I believe it will be interesting in the next 10 or 15 minutes to hear from the expert how they think the Congress went so far. And just to give you a brief overview, we had a techno college contribution, and then there was a postgraduate session, of course, and then we had several topics on professional challenges. And maybe I can start and ask Mr. Braun, who was spearheading this, the organization for this meeting, what he thinks of the Congress so far and whether or not these three topics he chose were properly chosen.
Well, I think they were. We all worked on the choice, and I think it's worked out very well. We've had very good attendance. So yesterday at the postgraduate course in the morning, we had almost 300 registrants, which was excellent. And as an overall view, I think it compares very well now with the registrations you see in the postgraduate courses in North America, and also the content, both in terms of what we discuss and the quality of the discussion, I think is very good. So I'm quite pleased that over the last several years that there's been gradual improvement all the time. The choice of subjects provided quite a lot of discussion. It's interesting, like in most things in surgery, that things do go around a bit. You know, 10 years ago we're discussing fellows, we're still discussing fellows. And maybe to some extent that represents a failure on our part that we don't make progress in finding out how best to manage things. But it's notable that the databases have been very much quoted this time. So the numbers that we have available do give us much more objective views about outcomes and so forth, which are helpful now, be more helpful in the future, I think, as they become more robust.
Let me maybe ask our young surgeon in training. I had the pleasure to work with him for a while in Munich. I was wondering, are you equally happy with the discussions? Do you think there should be more room for discussions, or we should be more strict on length of talks, because there have been the odd time limits been broken? I was wondering, what is your feeling after the second day?
Well, I have a good feeling on this EACTS meeting, especially for me as a young surgeon in training for this congenital field, and I was happy to see that, well, what you mentioned, the same discussion 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago, it's the same discussion now. So it's, for me, it's good to see there's not a real truth, but there's challenging, and that's challenged me to make progression in that field. So I was very much triggered by the talk of Chris Calderon this morning, that you face your past or face your future and fight the past. That's still a thing which is going on, and it's always good to stick to the time in a presentation, that there's a lot of discussion between the experts in the audience.
Well, as you know, that depends not only on who the domain chooses to give a lecture, but also on the chairs who might need to be a bit more strict in the near future to make sure that there is really, that they keep within the allocated time. Can I hear from Victor Raschka, who is a prominent surgeon from Germany, I said again, and who is already famous for his video presentations. I personally believe that is a very important asset. Instead of just seeing slide after slide and numbers after numbers, I think it's important to, personally, I think it's important what you are doing to provide films which allow the audience, also surgeons in training or people who are not as acquainted with surgical techniques, to understand what's going on. Maybe you can comment on that and let us know whether that could be done even more in the future.
Yeah, you basically answer on your comment. Anyway, I think that's the way how to go. This multimedia contribution, I think, open our scope of understanding, and it's much easier to show the trainees and other people how the things can be done, or at least how the institution which is involved is doing the different operations. And that's, I think, the key point, to exchange our knowledges in a much better and much more reproducible format. And multimedia, I think that's the format which has to be stressed. And hopefully it will get much more acceptance in a different type of presentation, and that would be the key, how to exchange our understanding.
Peter, maybe I can ask you again, someone in training. I've stressed it a few times. Would you wish the meeting to have more lectures like Chris Calderon's, which was truly outstanding, or would you like to see more papers being presented with discussions? What's your feeling about it?
From my personal standpoint, I was happy to present some papers in the past at such meetings. But from the learning perspective, I think it's better to have the expert in the field giving an excellent but maybe short talk and open the discussion. And I think the selection of the presenters so far is good. So it's a mixture of invited lecturers and some small parts of abstracts.
But of course, if the committee, if the domain is very restrictive, that might discourage in the future young scientists, young doctors to send in their abstracts. If they know anyway, there will only be a handful of abstracts accepted. I think it's, maybe you can comment on that. How do you want to balance it out to make sure that people know there's a fair chance of coming to a EACTS meeting and presenting data?
I think it's important we give opportunity for the younger members of our European Association to present papers. And I guess I'm a little bit sad that there is not more opportunity. We used to have posters, and there were poster presentations and discussions, but time was short. But I think that maybe we should look at that again, so that we can give opportunity for our younger colleagues to present in quite a good environment and give them the experience over the years that they need. The actual numbers of papers we're presenting are relatively small. Of course, it then depends on the quality of the papers submitted, and maybe we need to be flexible on that. If one year we have a large number of papers which are of good quality, then we should have more presented. If we have a limited number, then limit that and have more lectures.
Well, what I quite liked is that you focused with your domain on three topics. You had fallow, you had understanding single ventricle physiology, and you had complex TGA. So you were clearly a year ago letting the community know that these were the three hot topics, and which maybe we should, again, a personal opinion, maybe you can answer that, whether that should be advertised even more, so as to allow for more abstracts for these special lesions to come in, and then to choose the best. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the right way how to go, to advertise it even more, to motivate the people to submit as much abstract as possible. On the other hand, the chosen format, I think it's excellent to stress the pros and cons of our strategies. So, for example, today we had this tetralogy session, and we started with the introduction, how it should be done and what are the essential problems at this point, and then the papers follow, and these papers point out important aspects. I don't want to say that we, at the end, we found the answers on all our questions, but at least we got a hint in which direction to go. So the format, I think, is excellent, and we need a contribution of our members regarding the abstracts. There's no question about it.
Christian, can I just add to that? I think that it's up to us as leaders in our own field to go back to our own countries and encourage those centres that don't really contribute that much to be more active, because for us also it can be a bit tedious if we have the same speakers all the time. So we're always looking for new people, new ideas and new papers. And I think we can probably be more proactive
Well,
in that.
that brings me actually to something I have notched down. I know that from a lot of traveling I've been doing. Let's take this example of fallow. And you made this point, and you come from or you run a center with excellent results. Personally, I think if one makes, or maybe one should include sessions where you don't shy off maybe surgeons from a lot of countries who cannot produce results like you can. It's okay to make a firm stance in saying this is gold standard, but maybe we're setting the bar in some sessions extremely high, because we're trying, EACTS is embracing the whole world. We have attendance of over 4,000, I understand, people from all over the world, and some will just simply not be able to produce results like in Birmingham or St. Augustine. Can you comment on that?
Well, I think it's difficult. If people won't stand up and question or present their data, that's an issue, and somehow we need to make the forum, the meeting, I guess, more comfortable for them, if you like. And I think that's particularly so for colleagues, where trainees and so forth, they don't feel, in a way it's not for us as established heads of department or consultants to be questioning and answering. We're looking to train the younger people, but they have to feel comfortable in coming forward. And that's why this year we've tried to introduce the idea of having a junior chair as part of the meetings. I don't know how it will work out, and we'll have to see, but to try and make a positive message to them that they should be involved and feel free to ask questions. But coming back to what you're saying, we have to make more time available for those questions. That's very difficult to balance, because some papers elicit more queries than others, and that's up to the chairs to manipulate the time, I guess.
Peter, you want to say something?
I like the concept of more flexibility and the specific chosen subjects for this meeting. For example, 3 or 4 subjects, and then encourage almost all centers or young people or small series to come up with their results after maybe a short introduction. That's something that I like. And then all the young people like me, or even students, can come up with their abstract, but you don't have the heterogeneity of, well, just a session with 10 different topics. That's not making sense in understanding the fully aspect or the concept of the lesion or the surgery behind it.
Mr. Braun, can I ask you, it's probably a bit early, but do you have a rough idea of how next year's meeting will be? Do you like the general concept of focusing strictly in the postgraduate course on 2 or 3 topics, to be followed maybe by these professional challenges like we had this year? There were 3 topics, and then I understand you're going to do a wet lab on the last day, so hands-on sessions. Again, you include specialists. Is that the framework you will kind of stick to?
I think that will be the general framework, although there will be changes, and we obviously need to for our own sake, to make it different each time. We don't want to do the same thing every time, so that's an issue. Question of the length of the whole meeting is also, I think, has to be not addressed, but we shouldn't accept that it goes from, Saturday through to Wednesday necessarily. Everybody's very busy, so a lot of those involved would like to come for 2 days perhaps and be really focused and then go, rather than spending 5 days. There are a lot of meetings to go to, so all of these, the council and so forth, need to address and see how things evolve over time. As regards specific topics, it is difficult, and we've already started to try and work out next year. So this year we're having a combined session with the acquired John Pepper's group domain to have a combined. And next year we might well do with the vascular. We were discussing this yesterday as regards the question of the whole of aortic valve disease, from embryology through to adult life. So that's maybe the way we'll go, and we will also get more registrants, I think, for our particular areas like that.
And there might even be, maybe I can pass on to you, Victor, the Gooch patients are growing, and of course, we touched upon Gooch patients every here and then, but maybe in the years to come, we could focus in several sessions just on Gooch issues and maybe involve our adult congenital surgeons in these sessions, because they do fix AV valves at the regular basis. They operate on the aorta. Maybe you can comment, and you too.
Yeah, this is something which is evolving gradually. I think a very good example how our topics are changing was our technical college. You know, several years ago, at least in our strictly pediatric community, nobody was talking about the ablation. And now it's getting to be a very hot topic, and the same is true about the Gooch patient. And we need a very close collaboration with our adult colleagues and adult services to get through this, for us, very specific issues.
I understand you had adult training, and now you are...
In general,
Right.
you're trained with the adults, and I'm happy to work in a department which treats also pediatric and adult patients, so also the Gooch. And we learn from our adult aortic surgeon colleagues, or we do reoperations together. We learn from the mitral valve surgeons, from minimally invasive techniques. So I think that's a good collaboration. Maybe we can give that some place in the EACTS meeting as well, yes.
I think it's a very good idea, and I think a program or a session on Gooch problems might be very appropriate for next year.
And that could, like you have already done, you have invited, and I understand the committee is a congenital cardiologist or pediatric specialized cardiologist. Whether or not one should include an anesthesiologist could be a matter of debate. What do you think? Because they need special training to treat these patients.
I don't like anesthesiologists very much.
But we need
Joking
them.
apart, I think yes, one probably could, but it's surprising actually.
Or ICU specialists.
What session?
ICU specialists.
Yes, yeah. I think, well, it's interesting that the Foundation Weeks and our Specialist Congenital Week, which we should advertise, it occurs in October, there was a request from the registrants that we should include in perioperative care, if you like, that sort of thing. So that's certainly an opportunity. But it's surprising when you actually get down to formulate a particular program, how limited the time is actually sometimes. But maybe we should have a session on perioperative care, particularly regarding the problems with older patients, for instance, what we need to do with them, with our cardiology colleagues. So when you think about it, there are lots of different ways of approaching it.
But that's a nice way to choose several topics for our next meeting.
Yeah.
Well, what I very much like that we had that once or twice in the last 2 days that a young colleague was presenting a paper, and if he got stuck, he was assured that the chief of his unit was around, and so that eventually we really got answers to the questions which were raised. And I think that is also something one could even sending out the invitation letter, making sure that heads of the department or more senior colleagues are around, so that the young chap who is presenting doesn't feel lost.
Oh, it's very important. I quite agree.
Well, personally,
keeps things flowing.
Personally, that was my own experience as well a couple of years ago. So that's very nice that your own boss.
Did you speak Dutch then, or what?
No, I can just raise my hand and no. That your own boss is in the room, and sometimes as a young student you present some results you've never seen it in real life. So that's nice.
But generally, Christian, that's not a problem, because mostly if you have somebody presenting your data, certainly senior members of the team are there, aren't they? So that's usually helpful.
Responsibility how to manage.
Yeah.
But I had the feeling so far it has been different. I think we have yet again raised the level. It has been fun. No one got really stuck, and we got had a lot of take-home messages so far already. Do you think, especially from techno starting there?
Techno was excellent, actually. For me, even, it was very challenging. Yeah.
Mm.
The other thing I would say is that I think I've been very impressed by the hard work the presenters have obviously put in. I mean, the videos, the filming, the quality of the analysis that's been presented, I think is a very high standard this year. I've been very impressed.
I got a sign. You can say the famous last words now. We have about 2 minutes. Maybe is there anything you still want to share with us?
Not particularly.
How about you?
Well, this is our president, so I have to follow.
No. Joking apart, I think that one of the issues I faced in my first year doing this is that the last thing you want is the same people doing things. So if people listen to this, I would say if you feel you have a contribution to make, then you should get in touch, because we don't necessarily know everybody from each part of the country. We read the literature, so that's helpful. But we're always looking for new enthusiastic contributors, and you shouldn't be afraid of coming forward.
Good. So these people should either approach Mr. Braun or the committee, or go through the website of the EACTS, contact the Windsor head office, and be aware there are quite a few courses coming up next year.
Yeah, if you go to the EACTS website, they're all there, and they're very good. And there's a lot of courses going on, so they will survive if they're good quality. And that's what we have to ensure, that they are good quality and do generate interest.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank you very much for your attendance.